Now, there was a moment in Warframe's history where the game didn't necessarily ask you to be faster or stronger. What it asked was for you to work together. I know, crazy. No lone wolfing through missions, no nuking everything. It had planning, it had assigning roles, communicating, and hopefully succeeding because everyone understood what they were doing, and if they didn't, then it would result in a wipe. So before we had our Archimedes, our Archon hunts, our 99 calendar checklist and other weekly missions, for a while Warframe had 8 player trials. Raids in everything but name. And looking back now, it's easy to understand why they're still remembered so fondly. They were messy most of the time, they were demanding, but they also felt like a genuine event, a shared mission with real coordination, with everyone on voice, or at least hanging out and having fun, and you could have a proper laugh. So this is a retrospective, this is what we had, this is what it was like, and this is why Digital Extremes eventually removed raids from Warframe, even though a lot of people still wish that they were still here, or that they would at least come back in some shape or form, so that you could at least relive or maybe experience for the first time something like this in the Warframe universe. So Warframe has always been about power fantasy, right? You build a loadout and you become something unstoppable. Most of the game supports that fantasy. You can enter a mission with randoms, execute your plan, and leave with your loot, even if you never say a word to other players. Trials was just a little bit different. The mission itself assumed that you would coordinate, it assumed that you would communicate, it also assumed you would make decisions as a group. And if one person fucked up in one of the different, stages of those trials, then the whole thing would have to be restarted. Now, that was the fundamental appeal. Trials didn't feel like a longer mission, they felt like a different type of content altogether, something closer to an operation built around phases and mechanics rather than just pure damage output. And for a lot of players, that was exciting, because at that time in Warframe, it offered something completely different, a reason to form a squad and take on this challenge. Now, the law of retribution was introduced into Warframe in spring of 2015, our first trial. It had 3 stages that moved from a sabotage mission that required you to destroy toxin injectors, but also had doors that required 2 people in order to open them by standing on buttons. Then it went on to an infiltration stage where everyone had to stand on pressure pads in the right order while trying their best not to be pulled off the button by a Grenadier Scorpion. And then it finished off with a Vahek assassination stage, which required us to not get hit by his rockets and blown up in one hit. Now, what made all of this memorable wasn't that this was the hardest boss ever to kill, because he really wasn't. Players were speedrunning Vahek towards the end of raids in I think less than 25 or 20 minutes. But the whole idea of the raids isn't that you were just clearing enemies. You were handling hazards, there were squads of enemies, you were opening doors that required coordination, you were solving mechanics like standing on the buttons in the correct order because it mattered, and if you messed up then the whole squad wiped. Some of the most iconic moments from these raids weren't even the combat, they were the coordination moments, watching a friend getting pushed or pulled off a button and the whole squad wiping and then just poking fun at that person left memorable moments. And then there was the end, right? Vahek with a fight that had tactics and damage phases. When it went well, it felt organised and very satisfying. When it didn't go well, it could be a frustrating evening or a frustrating event. But either way, it was just memorable. Now, this was also the only place that we could farm Arcanes at the time. They were just introduced into the game. Arcanes at that time that could only be installed on either your helmet or on your Sayandana. But Arcanes, of course, are such a huge boost to your arsenal. Now, the law of retribution wasn't Warframe's only trial. A few months after the release of the Law of Retribution, DE released their second trial, the Jordas Verdict, in October of 2015. Now, the Jordas Verdict pushed trials in a completely different direction to the Law of Retribution. They added Archwing segments, it leaned into the infestation as the enemy and the hive mind, and a huge infested enemy flying through space. One of JV's defining qualities wasn't that it felt like a checklist of fecking steps to follow. The squad would navigate through space, they would transition then into an interior phase, you would manage surges, you would eventually split into different groups where different teams had different objectives at the same time. And it was that kind of design that made this raid feel really distinct. And when it worked, Jordas Verdict felt genuinely great. But it was also full of bugs and glitches that meant you could two-man it, or if a bug happened, you would tank the entire run and you couldn't finish it. And it had a whole list of other issues that never really got fixed. But like I said, it worked 60% of the time, all of the time. Now, the strongest memory of Trials for many old Warframe players isn't the environments or the bosses, it's the atmosphere of the run itself with fellow players. Trials created a new type of culture that Warframe didn't have back then. Back then, I guess the main thing that players were doing was the old T4 run, so you'd go for maybe an hour or 2 hours in a tower defense mission or something like that. But raids introduced this culture, like say the raid school bus community, that would shepherd new tenor through raids in order to teach them how to run these trials. So groups would schedule runs, players were taught mechanics, newcomers were guided through phases and roles. There was a shared experience, where to stand, what to carry, when to wait, who was responsible for each step. And because Trials had multiple phases, the run had a really nice vibe to it. You could feel the mission progress, you could feel the tension as well if someone messed up, and you could also feel the relief when you finally finished that last stage and completed the raid. That's why they were memorable. However, there is the other side to the story as well, which was the fragility of raids and of course the constant maintenance as well. Now, Warframe is a fast-moving live service game. Systems change constantly, movement evolves, damage evolves, new mechanics are added, new items, new arcanes, new weapons, and the power fantasy always grows. New modes appear and old interactions behave completely differently. And every large update creates new chances for older content to break, which means maintenance. Trials were heavily scripted, multi-phased content designed for up to 8 players. That combination, of course, is always going to create a risk, a lot of risk. More players means more variance. More variance means more opportunities for something to go wrong. And when something does go wrong in a multi-staged mission, the cost is that little bit higher because players, I guess, get more frustrated because they've been in there for a while and maybe they're through stage 2 or stage 3, and when there is a glitch or a bug, then there's always going to be that feeling of, I can't be bothered doing it again. And this was where a lot of players' frustrations came from. Not from the difficulty, but from the inconsistency of the issues that these raids have. Like the desync issues, or maybe the progression steps not registering correctly, mechanics behaving differently for different players, host migration is always the endgame boss for Warframe, and all of those issues hit that little bit harder with Trials because the entire structure depends on each stage working reliably. So Trials had two problems at once: technical fragility and of course the friction for players not wanting to run them again when issues would evolve. So Digital Extremes decided that raids needed to go on a pause, and they made it clear that Trials required ongoing attention to keep them working, and that attention had to come from somewhere, and keeping raids alive meant spending time fixing those raids instead of building new content and improving on other systems.
XGUI wants to know, what do you see for the future of raids? How are we going to change them, and to be determined?
Trials.
Trials.
Yep. Trials.
We call them raids, trials.
Trials raids.
So we had an announcement on Wednesday about the plan is to actually turn off Trials on February 28th on PC. And then console will follow, or we'll do them all at the same time.
Okay.
But basically, there's, there are a lot of work. The upkeep on them is particularly, endless. For 3 years, it seems every hotfix we have to have something in it. Every hotfix thread is just fix this.
It's low traffic as well.
Yes.
So, what's the future of them? I think, if I had to guess, I think it would be more of a redesign to fit better with maybe the core gameplay of Warframe. Right now, they kind of push to a section of like, stand still on this spot, do this weird designer puzzle, and it kind of doesn't really fit with the game anymore.
At the same time, the raid reward economy, like those Arcanes, one of the biggest reasons to play raids or the Trials, were moved into other parts of the game's progression. And that mattered because it reduced the pressure, or I guess the requirement, to keep Trials functioning, because if you could get the Arcane somewhere else, then why bother running the Trials? So when you step back now, it was absolutely the right decision. Warframe is more alive now than it has ever been, and they're not having to dedicate time to constantly fix things like the JV trial whenever they do a patch or a hotfix. And our Arcane inventory has increased substantially, and you can now get Arcanes from multiple different sources. Now, will raids ever come back? This is the part, I guess, where they have to answer it that little bit carefully. Digital Extremes have talked about raids over the years, and they've often described them as something they would like to revisit, but they've also framed them as a major undertaking, something that would need to be rebuilt to fit modern Warframe, not simply just reintroduce the old trials as they were.
First of all, I'm going to talk about raids and trials. This is something that I played back in the day, Megan and I, the team, and I think earlier in the year we talked about wanting to bring them back, but we're not going to talk about this or have anything to share until our Veilbreaker objectives are complete and our Duviri Paradox content is complete. So don't expect to hear about those for a little bit. We still care about them deeply and we think that they are an interesting thing to try and explore, but there's nothing to share about it until we bring you news, basically. So I'd rather be honest about that, and we have a lot of stuff to do, so I don't want it to be a continuous thing that you might expect to hear about on the next dev stream, because you won't.
If raids ever returned, it's likely they won't be the exact trials from the past. It would be something designed with newer systems in mind, with better stability, with better onboarding, and a better structure that can survive, I guess, the constant evolving live service game that Warframe is. That doesn't mean it's impossible, it means that the bar is set incredibly high. But the idea behind raids, coordinated content, where your squad matters, is still something that a lot of Warframe players want, or I guess reminisce about from the olden days, and it's something that the game has never fully replaced in the same way the trials did. Sure, we have EDA for weeklies, and we have ETA, and we have Archon hunts and Netracels, but when you look back at trials, you're looking at a moment in Warframe's history, or in its evolution, a time when Warframe tried something different, and when it asked players to slow down just a little bit and coordinate, a time where mechanics mattered more than just going in and nuking an entire room. And yes, trials weren't perfect, they had major issues, but those issues eventually, I guess, outweighed what it took to keep them running. But they are still remembered very strongly, not because they were flawless, but because they were distinctive. And if Warframe ever finds a way to bring that feeling back into what Warframe is right now, but more stable, more accessible, and built for our current power fantasy, then it could be one of the most meaningful returns to Warframe that we've ever had. But will we ever see raids return? I guess maybe not. Maybe ETAs and EDAs is what we can expect from this point onwards, and some of the newer game modes like the Parita Rebellion. But let me know in the comment section below if you have memories of your trials in Warframe, of the raids, what they are, if you fondly remember them or not, if you ever think that they will come back or not. And I think as far as retrospectives go, this is probably the last one in the series, because I can't think of any other system to talk about in relation to what Warframe used to be. If you can think of any that you'd like to see a video on, then by all means let me know as well. Either way, have a great day, have a great week, and as always, thanks for watching.